And then I see the disinfectant that knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number on the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that.
When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people. You're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please. They test and they test. We got tests that people don't know what's going on.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. What do we get? What do we expect to get when we return that person back to the White House? At best, a fundamental lack of understanding about human health, where incompetence could cost lives. At worst, an administration that takes active steps to put profits and personal vendettas above what's best for the country. And in doing so, putting the lives of every American and people around the world at risk. Keeping people safe and healthy should be something we can still agree on even now. Things like stopping the spread of pandemics, ensuring that medicines are tested and safe before they're sold and available, funding research to find cures to diseases that don't discriminate based on your political party, things like cancer. And that's exactly what's happening. That's exactly what we're seeing the new administration take aim at. Washington Post reports this, quote, health officials and experts said this week they are reeling after the new Trump administration on Tuesday abruptly halted external communication at the Department of Health and Human Services and its agencies, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Institutes of Health, meaning things like meetings of scientific researchers, experiments, other sciencey stuff. It all stopped. Decisions about who to give grant money to for their work stopped. Travel for employees at HHS stopped. Communications that are relied upon to disseminate critical health information about ongoing stuff stopped. That happened this week. Former CDC Director Tom Frieden pointed this out yesterday. CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report had provided real-time data and analysis about disease outbreaks and emerging health threats without a break every week since the year 1960 until today. Seems like a long time. The Post spoke with Victoria Seawalt, Chair of Population Sciences at City of Hope Comprehensive Cancer Center, who was scheduled to lead an NIH study section Thursday that was abruptly canceled without guidance on when it would be rescheduled. The session was scheduled to review grants focused on cancers and other chronic illnesses. She said this, quote, everything is basically in chaos, and frankly, everyone is terrified. We've never seen anything like this. This is like a meteor that crashed into all our cancer centers and research areas. That meteor, apparently all because this new administration wants Trump's people to monitor everything, including cancer research. A memo sent out by the acting HHS secretary, obtained by NPR, said this, quote, refrain from publicly issuing any document or communication until it has been reviewed and approved by a presidential nominee. So as health research and money and communications are paused. Trump also cut off the U.S.'s access to global health data when he pulled the country out of the World Health Organization in one of his very first executive orders. A frightening move as concerns over bird flu outbreaks are mounting. Alarm in the health industry is where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Epidemiologist, health economist, and chair of the New England Complex Systems Institute, Dr. Eric Feigelding is here, plus critical care physician, professor of pediatrics and pediatric disaster response expert, Dr. Michael Anderson is here. Also joining us, senior editor for health and science at Forbes, Alex Knapp is here. Alex, I'll start with you on the reporting. We only learn of some of these shutdowns or pauses when they're public facing. I wonder if you can just help folks understand how vast the medical and the health and sort of the federal agencies that work in this area are, and how much more could be impacted that we don't know about yet.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on the show. It's important to understand that the NIH is almost $50 billion a year worth of the federal budget, and that goes to research hospitals. It goes to providing care. It goes to biotech startups. It goes to collaborations with pharmaceutical companies to develop vaccines against potential pandemic threats. There's really a wide-ranging number of things that it does, and in addition to disseminating public health information and making sure and tracking disease outbreaks.
Dr. Anderson, I wonder if you can sort of orient us around what even falls into the category of some transition. I mean, I guess none of it when it comes to NIH, because the transition landing team under a normal transition is there to make sure that the sciencey stuff isn't impacted. Just talk about how unprecedented this moment is for the medical and scientific community.
Yeah, Nicole, it truly is unprecedented. And yes, when administrations change, there are sometimes gaps or hiccups or whatever it is, because a new team has to learn rapidly exactly what's in their portfolio. But this shutdown, this almost complete shutdown, is really disconcerting. And a couple of the pieces you quoted, there's something called a study section. It's very sciencey, it's very medicine-y. A study section is a really important, I would say, vital part of the research chain. That is when learned scientists, physician researchers get together, they review the grants, and they figure out who's going to be funded. You know, in 2025, we sit in an amazing time in medicine, curing so many people with different types of cancer, advances in pharmacology and drug therapy. How do we get there, though? We get there through research. And how do we get research done? We get it through mostly funding by the NIH. So the notion that study sections are shut down for any period of time and the terror that people are reporting as researchers is really disconcerting.
Can you help us work backward, Dr. Anderson, from the consequences to what the motive could be? Why would you do this? What would you be wanting to do if you would do this much damage to medicine and science?
Yeah, it's tough to control. You're either naive to the scope of what you've asked to halt, or you want control. You want such line-by-line control that you don't trust the learned professionals that have been doing this for a long time, that have been advancing science. And it's tough for me to say what the motivation is. I just know if you're a researcher in the trenches and you've been working so hard to get that grant to study this new therapy for cancer, this news has got to be devastating. Now, I'll just take one quick sidebar. It is tough to recruit physicians to be interested in doing this kind of science, and putting up these kind of roadblocks or this kind of, cessation of activities. I think we could see long, multi-year ramifications of this.
Dr. Feigling, it would be naive to think that Trump's one brush with political calamity before, during, and after his one brush with public health is unrelated to what we're seeing. But I wonder, again, if you could take us through the consequences of the actions of just the last 5 days.
Yeah, this is, again, unprecedented. But to add to what Dr. Anderson was saying, study sections, the domino effect is not just on federal workers. People can think, oh, NIH workers. No, the domino effect is to actually squeeze universities across the country, because NIH is the #1 funder of university research and medical schools and schools of public health. And so this is in certain ways, for all the epidemiologists who told Trump he was wrong, this is his retribution against all these medical and public health scientists who said, vaccines work, we need to, do these precautionary things, wear masks. This is a retribution. And when he squeezes and shuts down these study sections, the domino effect is a lot of these scientists won't get funded for another half a year. The domino effect will be huge. And also, what's not been reported enough is that not only has there been this freeze, but the NIH has politically removed all grant awards for any racial disparities, and of course, LGBT disparities as well. So if pages that used to say, we will fund racial disparity research in cancer, heart disease, diabetes, anything mentioning racial disparities have now been deleted by the Trump administration. So it's during this phase, they're actually politically purging all NIH research that is not in their favor, not in their political, Project 2025 ethos, and of course, exact this retribution against all the public health and medical scientists who, he has vendetta against from the pandemic.
As the only person I think who's worked in the dirty business of politics, I would say nothing would be more popular than curing a disease, any disease. I mean, what?
You would think.
Yeah, I mean, what is the long-term consequence, and how does, if Trump wanted to put all this back together, how long would that take?
Well, to rebuild something after you burn it down takes a very long time. But right now, I think after the squeeze over, they say, well, it's a temporary pause. I've heard this, it's a temporary pause until February 1st. But the issue is these meetings, these in-person meetings actually will be probably rescheduled 2, 3, 4 months from now. And the impact of that research is, we're talking about medical research, clinical trials that cannot pause, but they're scattered around the U.S., around the world, trying to find cures for all these diseases, find cures and vaccines and treatments for these neglected diseases. So the impact on universities will be humongous. Entire university budgets might be frozen for quite a long period of time. But greater than the silence on scientists and other researchers speaking out, for example, CDC not publishing the MMWR report that Dr. Tom Frieden mentioned, first time in 60 years, it's devastating because now it also, even if they restart it, there will be this eerie silence, this unspoken, you better not publish anything that we don't want you to publish, which, again, during the pandemic, we know the Trump administration muzzled MMWR scientific reports on the pandemic, or anything that he doesn't like. So they will have a huge chilling effect.
As we track multiple developing stories, first, the United States Senate is gearing up for Pete Hegseth's confirmation vote as Pentagon chief. The vote's scheduled for tonight. As of now, we've got 2 GOP senators, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, saying they will not vote to confirm the former Fox News host. Hegseth can only afford to lose one more Republican vote, which would force J.D. Vance then to step in and break the tie. At this hour, there are no other hard GOP no's, but several have expressed reservations. And the heat is rising this week with new allegations of wrongdoing, which Hegseth has denied. Also tonight, Donald Trump facing new accusations of playing politics with a national emergency. He's arrived in Los Angeles, as you've seen here. He's there to tour wildfire damage, greeted by California Mayor Gavin Newsom. Newsom and Trump have been publicly feuding over the response to the wildfires. Earlier today, Trump toured North Carolina, where he went after he demanded that conditions for California disaster relief, while pushing false claims about water management in that state.
President funding to Los Angeles because of its sanctuary city policy?
I want to see 2 things in Los Angeles: voter ID, so that the people have a chance to vote, and I want to see the water be released and come down into Los Angeles and throughout the state. Those are the 2 things. After that, I will be the greatest president that California has ever seen.
Trump has repeatedly talked about this so-called water conspiracy, but experts say he's wrong and that he's conflating multiple issues. Trump also getting fact-checked on the economy. The Washington Post saying he made multiple false or exaggerated claims when talking to world leaders this week, including getting it very wrong on inflation. While Trump critics are questioning whether he's already taking his eye off the ball regarding inflation, pointing to this striking exchange with Fox's Sean Hannity.
Turned off the spigot from up north in order to protect the Delta smelt.
Let me move on to the
And by the way, I don't really believe it's the Delta smelt, because nobody could do that. Somebody advised Joe Biden to give pardons to everybody but him. They wanted to take care of. Yeah, but Sean, they wanted to. I don't care.
They're yelling at me.
This is more important because right now the economy is going to do great.
I want to know about
I'm
the
here,
economy.
so the economy. But you have to understand, he had bad advisors on almost everything. It's like in the old days when the Secretary of State said he never made a correct decision on foreign policy. Joe Biden got very bad advice.
Sean Hannity not getting a word in edgewise. Joining me now is James Carville, legendary Democratic strategist. I mean, James, I'm personally not surprised that Sean couldn't get a word in edgewise. But anyway, on a fascism scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being peak fascism, how would you rate Trump's first week?
Delta smelt. Look, he just says anything that he wants to say. I mean, how many stories I have to read that the Delta smelt has nothing to do with this? But he's just going to keep plowing through, okay? And what we have to learn as Democrats, just let him punch himself out. Just remember, this is a little bit before your time, but people in my generation remember Muhammad Ali and his rope-a-dope. He just go to it the first 6 or 7 rounds, and then you come in and you measure up, and then you start launching bombs. And it's hard to sit here and just look at one, Greenland, Canada, canal zone, Delta smelt, you name it. But you just got to keep bobbing and weaving, and then in due course, you're going to be able to come in. But the big thing is, the number one promise, the biggest political promise of his generation, is he would get food prices down. Then he got in office and said, there's nothing I can do about it. Of course, eggs are $4 and something a dozen, and he keeps distracting us, and we keep getting distracted. But we'll come back in and we'll straddle this target and get it in range here before long, I think.
Yeah, well, the but my eggs has become the new kind of retort,
okay.
Right? So let's focus on kind of what's happening tonight then. The Senate is looking to confirm Pete Hegseth tonight. There were some blows, I think, glancing, albeit if we were going to stick with the Muhammad Ali kind of analogy here. There were some glancing blows that landed, I think, during the confirmation hearings. And the reason why we know that happened a little bit is you got at least 2 GOP senators who are the traditional naysayers, and Murkowski and Collins, that always have some concerns, quote unquote. They're a hard no, which I'm grateful for. But it looks like Trump isn't actually even 100% sure about his on-again, off-again buddy, Mitch McConnell. Your thoughts about whether or not Mitch McConnell gets a spine on this Hegseth confirmation?
I assume that he's going to vote yes. I mean, he ran that caucus for so long, and even if he votes no, Vance is going to, he might be saving it to let somebody else, some vulnerable incumbent, vote no. But they got another vote to spare because, as you correctly pointed out, if it's a tie vote, then Vice President J.D. Vance would be able to break the tie. And who cares? I mean, it's not horseshoes or hand grenades. If you confirm by 1 vote, you confirm by 100 votes, it's the same effect. But I do think that the Democratic senators are making them pay somewhat of a price for supporting this. And the more evidence that come out, the more evidence that's being hidden, the more people that they don't talk to, it builds a case. It's going to take time. We're not going to get instant results, and we just got to keep bobbing and weaving and rope-a-dope here. So far, they're doing okay.
James, you're from the great state of Louisiana. I'm based out of Florida. You and I are no strangers to natural disasters. Trump floated today getting rid of FEMA. I mean, and we just heard him before you came on trying to condition aid to California on voter ID. And talking about water coming down from the north to the south. I mean, I get your point that we need to keep on bobbing and weaving, but is there a critical mass, you think, that we reach, though, an accumulative effect of having something like aid, federal aid from an agency that we've always recognized for decades as being around to help all Americans, regardless of political party, that it's going to blow up in his face a little bit on this?
Well, it is, and the thing is, it'll take a little time. It's going. Now let's take things. The reason we live in a country, you're from Florida, I'm from Louisiana. We have a hurricane, which we're all very familiar with, but maybe too familiar with. The state of Louisiana, New Orleans metropolitan area, cannot deal with all the things that come with hurricanes: deaths, flooding, storm surges, excessive rain, wind damage, emergency stress on emergency services, et cetera, et cetera. That's why you have a national government. All right. Same thing is true in Southwest Florida that I was just in. And everybody I talked to, I would ask, what was the effects of the latest storm? They said, I had water in my house. They had to get back up and running. And Southwest Florida is not sufficient to take care of its own business when you have a disaster of this level. That just like we have in the forest fires, in Los Angeles. Well, it would be ridiculous to live in a country and say, well, I'm just going to let California deal with it. But California's whole system is stressed. Literally, every available firefighter is justifiably there. Every dollar in resources is going to try to protect these people's homes, to get them rebuilt. That's why you have a United States of America. That's the exact reason that we founded this country, that there were certain things that we need. And I would say that emergency preparedness and emergency relief is very part of the rationale of having a country. And anybody that's we all live in a disaster zone of one kind and another. You know, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, natural, any kind of disaster you can think of, flooding for sure. And that's just, and more of this is going to come about. Just understand, this is not stopping. It's just going to go up exponentially.
Well, it's going to get worse because of climate change, which is something that Trump has denied and the Trump administration is not embracing whatsoever. Very quickly, before I got to let you go, James, you know, Steve Bannon famously said that they're just going to flood the zone with ish. Correct. I'll use that word before I get edited out.
I'll say fecal matter. I think I can say that.
Fecal matter. Okay, there. We're on the same page. Yeah. So, and listen, I get it. And I love the idea of bobbing and weaving, because I agree that I think that we kind of stay on our toes and we prepare for it. But this guy has been installed in office for 4 years, and that's a long time to be bobbing and weaving. Where are the Achilles heels, in your opinion, right now, that we could actually take immediate action to do? Again, I understand we're resigned to 4 years, but where are the Achilles heels we can do immediate action and immediate harm?
We've got midterm elections coming up. Recruiting is very important. And if we show the potential candidates that we're very effective at doing this, we're not going to control the executive branch of government. That's a given. But understand, they have a 1 or 2 vote majority in the House. We can easily do that. We have an objective to work for in 2 years. Like, I'm as distraught as you are, anybody watching this network right now, about the results or where we are in the country. But you know, you can, as they say in the Marine Corps, you can wish in one hand and spit in another. They actually don't say spit because it's a family network. We'll say spit in another and see which one fills up the fastest. And, you know, where we're faced with, and I do think that we need a rope-a-dope. We need to be clever. We don't have power, but there are a lot of things at our disposal. As we get closer to the election, it'll continue. But we need to just keep bringing this up. They got a lot of tough votes to make. Leader Jeffers, Leader Schumer, look, if they want to do something to advance American people, we're willing to. If they want to do something to advance the interests of oligarchs, we're not. Everything they do is going to advance the interests of oligarchs. You don't have to worry about that. It's all coming.
Right now, Donald Trump is in California meeting with officials after looking at the wildfire devastation. Trump was greeted on the tarmac by the state's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom, who he has blamed for the wildfire response. Standing next to Newsom, Trump told reporters, quote, "We are going to take care of things," which is a very different tone than he had just earlier today when he's talking about punishing California. While visiting areas affected by Hurricane Helene in North Carolina, which voted for Trump, which obviously makes a big difference in his mind, Trump floated the idea of withholding aid from California in the midst of the most expensive natural disaster of all time if they did not implement voter ID. He also said he wants to get rid of or overhaul the Federal Emergency Management Agency, better known as FEMA. Of course, that's the federal agency responsible for coordinating with state and local agencies after natural disasters. Congressman Robert Garcia is a Democrat who represents parts of Los Angeles County, and he joins me now. I want to play for you what he said about FEMA, because I think a lot of people, obviously, disaster relief is difficult. People have had all kinds of run the range of experiences with FEMA, and often they're interfacing with FEMA at the most difficult moment in their lives. So there can be frustrations. But whether you think this is a good idea, take a listen.
I'll also be signing an executive order to begin the process of fundamentally reforming and overhauling FEMA, or maybe getting rid of FEMA. I think, frankly, FEMA is not good.
Obviously, the president can't unilaterally get rid of FEMA. It's congressionally constituted. What do you think of that?
I mean, look, it's hard to know what to think of the president's visit today. I'm here back home in California. The fires have been completely devastating. I'm glad that the governor was able to greet him in a way that looks like there could be some partnership. But we shouldn't trust Donald Trump. He has been very clear that he wants to condition aid. Mike Johnson and the Republicans in the House have said the exact same thing. And just hours before his visit, he's putting conditions on what he's going to essentially ask for from our state. And so we shouldn't have conditions. And absolutely what we should not be doing is eliminating FEMA. This is an agency with incredible people, men and women who have worked to literally rescue people's lives, their livelihoods, and help people rebuild in emergencies. These are some of the best emergency management people in the world work for FEMA. And he just wants to just eliminate it, just with the stroke of a pen. And so I'm glad the president is there. Clearly, we need that support. But I'm not sure which Donald Trump we're going to get in the next hour or the next day. What we need is an unconditional support and declaration that we're going to get our disaster aid with no conditions.
And of course, that's exactly what happened in myriad disasters, including just last year for the victims of Hurricane Helene. Oh, there was no conditions put on it. There was no Democrats asking for that. It was not thinkable. I want to note that the FEMA reform or privatization or abolition, like many of the things that have come up in the first week of the Trump administration, is echoed in Project 2025, which he said he'd never read and had nothing to do with. They talk about the opportunity to include privatizing FEMA, reforming it, or shift the majority of preparedness response costs to states and localities instead of the federal government, which, of course, is what he's talking about. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. It aligns there. One thing that's sort of, I don't want to get too in the weeds of some of his more absurd delusions, but my understanding of the condition of aid, as I heard it discussed by your colleagues who are Republicans, is that at least they were plausibly connecting it to some policy around how fires are dealt with. But today he says voter ID. Like, it has nothing to do with, oh, we're going to condition aid if you do this about, like, your land use. He wants voter ID for California because, as he told Dr. Phil, if Jesus counted the votes, he would have won California.
And by the way, you need an ID. You need to have actual identification to vote in California, to register to vote. That's very basic. So I'm not sure the president or the Republicans in the House know what they're talking about. And yes, Chris, you're absolutely right. In Project 25, it literally says to eliminate FEMA and to essentially give those funds to the states. President Trump repeated that today. And so Project 2025 is here. And to think that we're going to implement, take away federal aid, move it to the states in times of major disasters is not acceptable. And I think Democrats in the House and Congress have been pretty clear. This is a non-starter. We will not support conditioning aid, certainly not to some bizarre way of treating fires, which is not really realistic, but obviously not to policy and to state law back in the state of California. And so, look, I hope the president has a good visit. I think the governor is doing a great job. We need our disaster aid, and we absolutely should not be eliminating FEMA for disasters across the country, which are likely to happen again in the future.
Final, quickly, the president has some very strange fixations and I think false ideas about California hydrology, where water comes from. I think he's confused a set of beefs that the Central Valley farmers have about California water management from the Sierras with the way that Los Angeles gets water. And now he's talking about opening up. Is there some secret store of water that's not open that if you opened would solve Southern California's fires?
Absolutely not. And I know he's just signing some executive order right now that's somehow opening up water supplies from the north. I mean, unfortunately, that is a bizarre fairy tale that he's living in. That just does not exist. We have a water supply. The cause of these fires, let's be crystal clear, have been historic winds that have come through and moved fires across the LA region and across Southern California. We are seeing the climate crisis here in California. We are seeing these winds that are moving these fires at quick speeds. That has been the main cause. It has not been a water issue. And yes, there are infrastructure investments that need to be made, as they need to be made across the country. What we really need is that commitment on disaster relief. And so I think this executive order and his fixation on this water issue is bizarre.
Let's bring in NBC's Aaron McLaughlin in Newark, New Jersey. Our Priscilla Thompson is in El Paso, Texas. Also with us, NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Aaron, what do we know about what unfolded there in Newark?
Hey there, Anna. Well, we're still working to piece together what exactly happened here in Newark, New Jersey. Yesterday, we spoke to a number of members of this community, and they tell us they are too afraid to speak out. According to media reports, there was an ICE raid at the seafood depot that you see behind me, but the mayor's office at this point not willing to even confirm that. What we know from the mayor in the form of a statement that they issued late last night that ICE arrived at a local business unannounced without a warrant and detained a number of individuals, including undocumented residents, as well as a U.S. citizen. The mayor talking specifically about a military veteran that he says was detained, his military documents questioned. Now, it's unclear from the mayor's release if any arrests were made. ICE has issued a statement responding to the reports of this raid, saying, quote, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement may encounter U.S. citizens while conducting field work and may request identification to establish an individual's identity, as was the case during a targeted enforcement operation at a work site today in Newark, New Jersey. This is an active investigation, and per ICE policy, we cannot discuss ongoing investigations. We have heard from the New Jersey Attorney General in a statement today say that local and state officials were not involved in this raid. Remember, Newark is considered to be a sanctuary city. We are expecting a press conference from local officials in the next hour or so.
And hopefully we'll get more details then. Aaron, thank you for bringing us the latest. So, Julia, we now have these disparate reports of ICE agents at businesses in not only New Jersey, but also New York and Massachusetts. But do we know if these are new operations or part of ICE's usual enforcement? Because there's the political optics and reality. So give us that reality check.
Well, three things have changed in the way ICE has started doing business in the last 24 hours, Anna. One are workplace raids. That's something the previous Trump administration did, but the Biden administration did not do workplace raids. Instead, if an employer was found to have hired undocumented immigrants, they would try to go after the employer rather than the immigrants, and they would try to arrest immigrants in places like their homes and have warrants to go in and arrest them in those cases. The other thing that has changed, of course, is those military planes. Not only were they deploying the military to the border, but they deported some migrants yesterday on military planes. Deportation is not different. The fact that they're flying them, not different. The planes are different. The other thing is just the sheer numbers. We understand that they deported over 500 migrants just yesterday. On average in September, that's the latest month we have public data available from ICE from the Biden administration. Those were about 282 a day. And we know in the first 24 hours of the Trump administration, they deported roughly 300. So the numbers are getting bigger, the tactics are getting more aggressive, and the way they're deporting them using the military, that has all changed. Other than that, a lot of targets could have already been on this list. In order for them to do investigations and figure out who might be a public safety threat, who they want to go out and target, a lot of that work was actually done under the previous administration, Anna. It's not new for ICE to be arresting immigrants, and it's not new for them to be going after public safety threats.
Lisa, the mayor there in Newark said this was a warrantless raid. Is ICE allowed to go into workplaces without a warrant?
Yes, for the most part. ICE can enter the public spaces of a workplace. So, for example, they can go into a building's lobby. They can go into a supermarket or a restaurant or a retail store. What they can't do without a warrant, Anna, is obviously they can't enter a home without a warrant, but they also can't enter what are known as like the private spaces of a workplace. Think about what's behind the door, for example, at a restaurant, or what might be in the basement. Those are private spaces. ICE does need a warrant there. The particulars of this raid will need to be sorted out over the next few days. But even the city of New York, in its guidance to people about ICE raids, will say, yes, ICE can enter your public workplace, and you need to know that.
Lisa, we also just had the first court block of an executive order issued by President Trump on immigration, specifically his order to end birthright citizenship. What did this federal judge say, and what's next?
federal judge said that this is, and Julia Ainsley had our wonderful reporting yesterday where she reported that he said this is blatantly unconstitutional, that the federal government could not even articulate a valid basis for this during the hearing yesterday. He has essentially put the executive order on hold for 14 days, allowing the Trump administration to appeal. Of course, Anna, there are also 4 other cases that are progressing simultaneously, some brought by other states, some brought by civil liberties groups, some brought by immigrants themselves. And those will play out over the next few days. And as we know from Julia's reporting also, this is not scheduled to take effect until mid-February. So this is really just putting on pause something that isn't yet ready to be implemented. But we can expect this to escalate through our appeals courts and through other federal district courts, the trial courts, pretty quickly.
Yeah, Judge Kuhnauer saying this is a blatantly unconstitutional order. It took him no time to reach that conclusion. Priscilla, you were there at the border where my understanding is the first troops have now arrived under this new deployment. What do we know about their assignment there in Texas?
Yeah, Anna, it is detection and monitoring, not immigration enforcement, that they are going to be doing. And I'll just give you a sense of what's happening on the ground here. We were actually out reporting yesterday when we saw these military planes in the sky, and we immediately made our way over to the Biggs Army airstrip where we are now, and we captured those planes actually landing here, troops getting off of them, and confirmed with the spokesperson at Fort Bliss that those were some of the troops that had been deployed as a part of this U.S. southern border mission, that they expected to receive about 1,500 Army and Marine troops in the coming days to help assist in this mission. And we have seen this morning those military transport vehicles moving around. So there is activity here. And we've also been talking to residents here about how they're feeling about all this. We spoke with a student who is Afro-Latina. She is Cuban and Mexican, about how she is feeling. And I want to play a little bit of that conversation.
It's terrifying. I mean, I get scared because of my parents. They're immigrants, and I don't want to be constantly be on the watch out. Have to be scared what's gonna happen. I just want to live a carefree life. I have a friend whose dad, he ended up getting deported, and it's honestly really sad because he wasn't even able to go to her graduation.
And as Julia mentioned, this is the first time that we're seeing these military aircraft being used for these missions. We did see one of them taking off yesterday, and a person familiar tells us that that aircraft was bound for Guatemala. Now, as for what these troops who have just arrived are going to be doing today and in the coming weeks and months for however long they're here, we're told that it could look like building border barriers, putting up Constantine wire, that kind of thing, and also assisting with some of the flights that may be leaving from here, but again, not specifically immigration enforcement. And we are also, and so we're keeping an eye here because there could be more planes landing with additional troops, and we're also keeping an eye out in the case that there are more planes leaving with migrants on them. Anna?
All right, Priscilla, thank you for that reporting. Go get warm. Looks cold there. Julia, you have some new reporting as well that migrants at the southern border are now being just turned away, just even before they are able to go to the ports of entry and make a lawful asylum claim. What more do you have on this?
Well, this is something Priscilla and her crew have been helpful in reporting as well. We are getting reports across the border, in fact, it may be border-wide, where migrants are not even allowed to approach a port of entry to make an asylum claim. What that means, Anna, is in effect, the asylum system has come to a complete halt, and the right for anyone to claim asylum at the southern border is now totally taken away, because that was the last place. Trump did away with CBP-1. That allowed migrants to make appointments for asylum on a phone app and wait in northern Mexico until they could come to that appointment. The Biden administration made it nearly impossible for anyone to claim asylum if they were crossing the border illegally and stopped by Border Patrol. These last places are supposed to be legal ports of entry where migrants can show up with their documents, make a claim that they have a reasonable fear of persecution if they're returned to their home country. Now we're told they haven't even been allowed to get that far physically. They've been turned back around before they can go in and make that claim. This could end up in a lawsuit. There's already a lawsuit from the ACLU pending right here in federal court in D.C. that sued the Biden administration for restricting asylum in June. They added CBP 1 to that lawsuit on Monday night when Trump made that executive order ending CBP 1. Now we could probably expect that they're going to bring this new way of blocking asylum into that lawsuit and tell the judge, look, there is absolutely no way, and this is in violation of U.S. agreement with international norms, that people need to be able to claim asylum in some fashion, Anna.
Right. So to be clear, Julia, right now, as it stands, is there any lawful means of getting into this country?
Not that I know of, honestly. I mean, we have to keep reporting this. We're reporting it on a case-by-case basis. We know of multiple places where people have been turned away. I don't know of any place at this moment where someone can make an asylum claim at the border and get it.